I'm Polly Warren and welcome to the Positive Perimenopause podcast. This is the place for some positive inspiration to help you through the rollercoaster ride of perimenopause. I truly believe that with the right support, knowledge and wellness tools, you can feel your best yet, because I'm learning this life phase can be a truly exciting and often pivotal time of life. With every episode, my mission is to support and empower you to own your menopause, because it's time to start taking care of the most important person, and yes, that's you. So thank you for being here and sharing your time with me. Now let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing? I hope you've had a great week. This week I am doing a solo episode. You've got just me, and I am going to be talking all about stress and how stress can really affect our perimenopause experience. And the reason that I decided to talk about stress today is that the other day I was sitting around the dinner table with my family, and I don't know how the conversation came up, but my husband and I were kind of almost, we were sort of laughing a little bit about how crazy I was when I was in real depths of perimenopause. And the kids kind of were listening to this conversation and they were a bit like, Mum, you weren't that nuts, were you? I don't remember that. And it was probably because I did a very good job at hiding a lot of it from them. But then when I pointed out to them that I was quite shouty quite a lot of the time, I was really irritable, and I did say to them that I had some terrible guilt still, although I'm really trying to let that go now because there's no point holding on to it because the time has passed. But I do remember, and I do have this guilt of just not spending time, really precious time with them, of not being really present with them. I just wanted at the time to go on to the next thing. You know, they'd come home from school. It's right. Do your homework, eat your dinner, tidy up dinner, go and have a bath, get in your pajamas. It was almost like I was just desperate for that moment at the end of the day where I could just sit down on the sofa and zone out in front of the TV and not have to think about anything or worry about anything until I had to kind of wake up and do it all again the next day. And I'm sure you may be able to relate to this. But in the process of that, I lost so much. And I think the best way to describe that is I just wasn't very present with that. And I do have this guilt. And that was because I was just really stressed out. I was stressed out with everything, like making sure the kids were well fed, making sure that they were in bed on time, making sure that I was doing a good enough job at work, making sure that my house was relatively tidy, all of that things, which can be really stressful. And you feel it from all angles. And because I was in this state of stress, my body was in this constant fight or flight mode, which causes increased anxiety and can ultimately really exacerbate perimenopause symptoms. And I can really see that now when I look back at how I was. And I also can really see this in friends of mine. I can see it in clients. You know, I often have clients come to me and they are so strung out by life. They are so busy at keeping everything together because that is what we do as women. We are juggling a million balls all at the same time and we're keeping it all together. And ultimately we are probably the last priority on our list. And so we're just coping and our systems are in a really elevated state of stress. And that is not doing us any good. So I want to just start really today by outlining to you what is actually happening to us. What are some of the effects of this stress on our body when we are not giving ourselves an opportunity to shift out of this stress state? So let's just start with that. You know, what is actually happening? So when you're exposed to any stressor, whatever that might be, your body perceives danger. So it doesn't matter if it is a really properly dangerous situation as we might perceive a dangerous situation, or if you're just sitting in traffic and you're late to a meeting, the body perceives it the same. It is still danger. And what it then does, it releases some hormones which are designed to support the body at this time in a sort of a life-threatening situation. These hormones are designed to keep us safe, keep us alive. That's what it's all about. So initially what happens is your body will produce adrenaline and cortisol. And that's when you start to feel your heart rate increase, your breath might start to quicken, your muscles might start to tense. All of your senses begin to heighten and you get a real rush of glucose to the blood. So here, if you were to be faced with a giant bear or a tiger, you are primed to fight it or to run away. Your body is ready for that really dangerous situation. And then once that stress passes, the body then should return to its normal state. However, here is the problem with our modern day living. We are exposed to just so many constant non-life threatening stresses, work deadlines, numerous Zoom presentations, family dramas, busy commutes, whatever it might be. And it's this repeated activation of the stress response which then really impacts our health and well-being. You probably notice it, if you, for example, are driving in your car and then a car cuts out in front of you and it really takes you by surprise. I mean, stress then is a really positive thing because it kind of makes you react in a really quick way. But that's when your heart might start to beat, you get those sweaty palms, but your senses are so heightened. So it's a good way, but the problem arises when we can't actually return our systems to a more relaxed state. It's when we can't turn this stress response off. So just for those of you who don't know, all of this is happening in our autonomic nervous system. So this has two branches. So we've got the sympathetic branch and then we've got the parasympathetic branch. The sympathetic branch is our fight or flight stress response mode, and our parasympathetic is more of our relaxed state. It's where it's called rest or digest because that's where all the other processes in your body can actually can happen because we're not busy surviving in the sympathetic state. So as I said, cortisol itself is a necessary hormone. It keeps us safe. It's really important for survival. But when it's constant, then it can elevate our blood pressure. It can slow down our metabolism, which we really don't want as we age because our metabolism slows anyway as we age. It can be exhausting being in this stress state of the whole time. And it can really then start to take its toll on our bodies and increase our risks of longer term health issues, things like diabetes, heart attacks, strokes, and we don't want that. When we're in a state of heightened stress for long periods of time, it can also cause symptoms which actually are incredibly like perimenopause symptoms. So it can affect our libido, it can affect our concentration, it can increase weight gain. We're going to talk about that in a bit. It can cause excess anxiety, low mood, gut problems. So this is an important subject. So I want to now just talk a little bit about why stress is an issue, particularly during perimenopause. I mean, it's an issue for anybody who's stressed out, but particularly in perimenopause and menopause, it can become a real problem. So I've got 5 reasons why stress exacerbates perimenopause and perimenopause symptoms. So the first of these reasons is that you can't tolerate stress as well during perimenopause as you can otherwise. And this is because the menopause transition is a stress on the body in itself, with all of those changes which are naturally occurring, but the body is kind of working hard already to cope with all of these changes. And so what it means is that your body is producing more cortisol anyway. So its baseline levels are higher. And we know that when we've got too much cortisol production going on, it can really disrupt this delicate dance between your sex hormones. So between estrogen and progesterone. And we know and remember it's the ratio between these two hormones which is so important. And it's when the ratio becomes out of whack between these hormones that we get that vast variety of symptoms. Also, progesterone, which is the first of our sex hormones to decline at perimenopause, it starts declining on average from about the age of 35 onwards. That can also really be affected by too much stress because the substance, which I can never pronounce, it's called pregnenolone. I did it. That was okay. So it's called pregnenolone. Basically, that substance is the precursor substance to both cortisol and to progesterone. So when we are busy producing so much cortisol, it means that there's not enough pregnenolone to then produce the progesterone as well. So it means that our progesterone levels decrease even further because survival always wins. Our body will always favor whatever it takes to survive. So this is when you might see signs of things like heavier and more painful periods, increased bloating, maybe breast tenderness or worsening PMS symptoms. So all of those things are signs of low progesterone. So in order to keep our hormones as balanced as possible, which, don't forget they are fluctuating during perimenopause, keeping stress low or keeping our cortisol levels as low as possible is going to help. Okay, another reason why stress exacerbates perimenopause is because it stops you from sleeping well. Now, we all know that sleep can become tricky at this stage. It's often one of the first signs that there are changes afoot. And this is because our sleep hormone, melatonin, has a direct relationship with cortisol levels. So we need the cortisol levels to help us wake up in the morning. And it's when we wake up in the morning that our cortisol levels are naturally high. So that helps us get out of bed and go about our day. And that's when our melatonin levels are at their lowest. But as you go through the day, what happens is your cortisol levels begin to fall, well, they should do, and they're lowest in the evenings. And when they're low, that means that melatonin can be produced in high levels, enabling us to sleep. So it's a little bit like a kind of a balancing scale. When cortisol levels are high, melatonin levels are low. And when melatonin levels are high, cortisol levels are low. So the problem is when you are under constant stress and your cortisol levels remain high, it's going to interfere with your melatonin levels because they are going to remain low. And this is going to really affect your sleep. So it might be trouble getting to sleep, but also it might affect you being able to actually stay asleep. So reducing your cortisol levels is going to help you with your sleep. Okay, my third reason why stress can be so detrimental at perimenopause is because it really makes you gain belly fat. Now, we know anyway that this is a time where it's easier to put on that belly fat. But what's happening is that during perimenopause, the production of estrogen switches from the ovaries to the adrenal glands. Mother Nature's amazing. Your body does have a bit of a backup system. Although the estrogen which is produced from our adrenal glands isn't as potent as the estrogen from our ovaries, it's still a bit of estrogen. So it's in these adrenal glands, however, that also make your stress hormones cortisol and adrenaline. But the problem arises that if the adrenal glands are too busy making stress hormones, they're not able to take on that role of making the estrogen as well. Because remember, your body always favors survival if it's got a choice. And the stress hormones and adrenaline are needed for survival. So your body then needs to find another way to naturally increase your estrogen production. So it thinks it's being really clever. And how it does this, it does it through storing fat around the tummy, so around your middle. The fat that's stored here is known as adipose tissue, and it's been found to produce estrogen. So it's kind of like a plan B for the body, but obviously it's not that desirable for us. A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you. And unfortunately, the more stressed we are, the more body fat we will create. I mean, honestly, the body's trying its best, but it's not that good for us. Also, just another thing here, when our stress response is on, what's happening is your body increases that blood sugar conversion from the liver into the bloodstream, because again, the body thinks it needs to run away from that wild animal, or it might need to fight it. So it will need extra energy. So again, it's trying to be super clever. But remember, the body hasn't changed in about 60,000 years. It doesn't realize the difference between running away and fighting and sitting in a traffic late for a meeting. It still thinks there's something really dangerous about to happen. So once that stressful event is over, whatever that might be, the body thinks it's going to be really clever and convert the sugar, which it had converted from the liver, which it hasn't used, back into fat. And it places it around the middle, again, in your belly area, near to the liver, because it thinks, right, I'll put it there, ready for that next stressful event to happen. It will be ready just in case I need it. And unfortunately, our central fat cells have 4 times the amount of cortisol receptors on them. So if you're stressed, then these fat cells are calling out for you as well to store more fat here, ready for the next stressful event. So there is a lot going on here to encourage storage of fat around your middle. So don't give yourself a hard time if you are noticing your belly area widening. There's all these systems, all these things going on in your body. It's a real double whammy. And then, just to add insult to injury, the body thinks it needs to refuel, because 60,000 years ago, it probably would have resulted in using up a load of energy from running away from that wild animal or from fighting that wild animal. So what we get then are these cues for these really strong cravings for refueling. So often that might be in the form of kind of sugar or caffeine, because your body's going, I need to refuel. I've used up loads of energy, even if it hasn't in our modern day world. So this is where it's a real catch-22, because as we know, caffeine and sugar create more fat and more cortisol release, which then makes us crave these things even more. And this is when, unfortunately, we get on that blood sugar roller coaster. And every time our blood sugar goes up and then it has to come down and it dips, that's when our body produces even more cortisol. So we then are just in this real vicious cycle. And that's just creating more and more cortisol. So there's a lot there which is going on. So a lot of this isn't your fault, but the good news, there are so many things we can do here to get the body working for us much, much better, which I'm going to talk about a bit later on. Okay, my 4th reason why stress is an issue at perimenopause is, no surprise, it can really upset your mental health. I don't need to tell you this. When you're stressed out, you feel more irritable, you're maybe a bit more shouty, you might be a bit more anxious. And we know that, as estrogen declines as we go through perimenopause, it impacts our brain function, because estrogen has loads of positive impacts on the brain. So it includes boosting serotonin, which is our happy hormone. It supports the memory. And so when estrogen levels are declining anyway, it's impacting our brain function. But when we add on top of that stress and increased cortisol levels, it totally exacerbates this even further, and we can become incredibly short-tempered. it basically also reduces that increased cortisol reduces how much serotonin you have available. So that's kind of affecting your the amount of happy hormones you've got in. And that's obviously going to negatively impact and affect your mood. So persistent elevated cortisol levels really will cause an increase in anxiety, in fluctuating emotions, and obviously that can all then lead to depression as well. And when we have all of those things like anxiety and depression, that can then link to increased hot flushes and the severity of our symptoms. So that's something really to be aware of. My final reason why stress is an issue at perimenopause is that it messes with your digestive system. Now, when you are in a stressed state and your body's in that sympathetic nervous system state, what's happening is all of the body's energies is focusing on survival. And it takes away its focus from all of the other systems in your body. So they tend to sort of close down. It includes your immune system, and it also includes your digestive system. So I don't know if you've noticed that if you're particularly stressed, you might experience more bloating, more wind, maybe you're really uncomfortable. So this is because your digestive system isn't being allowed to work properly. So that's one reason, but also our digestive system needs to be able to pass nutrients through the small holes into the bloodstream to be taken all around the body to be used by other organs and other cells. And when we've got really increased stress levels going on, it can increase how leaky our gut is. And that results in much larger than normal particles of food entering into the bloodstream. And this is not a good thing. And this may result in an immune response and increases your risk of things like food tolerances. So classic symptoms of food intolerance include things like bloating, excessive wind, constipation, itchy skin, acne, fatigue. So none of that is a good thing, particularly as we're going through perimenopause. So as you can see, stress has a lot to answer for. I heard last week Dr. Rangan Chatterjee on his podcast say that between 70 to 90% of what a doctor sees in any given day is some way related to stress. I mean, that's just nuts, isn't it? So I really do believe that we all have a responsibility to start looking at the stress in our lives so that we can become aware of how we can start to manage it. It's not healthy for us. And although our lives are busy and stressful, it is super important, particularly at perimenopause, that we start to take some actions. Now, stress can come from so many different areas of your life, and there are so many factors that can impact your stress levels. I know at midlife there is an awful lot going on, and you probably feel like you're being pulled in every direction. And so for a lot of you, I imagine that you are experiencing emotional stress. Now, stress can be put into 4 different categories, really, and emotional stress is one of them. And this is when you really feel some sort of strain, you're being pulled in all directions, maybe your relationships become strained, you just got too much to do. But I suppose you've also got things like, maybe you've had a bereavement recently, and that can really take its toll on you and your emotions, and that can really affect you. And all of this emotional stress can affect the way that you think. A really good episode to listen to, which is a very good example of the effect of emotional stress and really trauma, I suppose, would be to go back and have a listen to the episode with Natalie Russell on learning how to love yourself. Then we have physical stress. So this might be when you perhaps are overexerting yourself. Maybe you're over-exercising. Gosh, another episode which we've done, which is bringing to mind, is that episode, I think it was episode number 2 with Perimenopause Hub founder Emily Barkley. And she at the time was doing training for Ironman competitions, and she just was overdoing it physically, and finally her body just decided that it was going to pack up, and it really brought on her perimenopause symptoms. So just, again, it's about listening to your body. But physical stress could also include things like allergies or autoimmune conditions. That's all giving your body additional stress. And then, of course, we've got lifestyle and environmental stress. So things like smoking, alcohol, not doing enough exercise, things which are going to really affect our systems, that can also create stress within the body. Not getting enough sleep, toxins as well in household products and toiletries, not ever relaxing. So all of that can be grouped under that sort of lifestyle environmental stress. And finally, we've got food stress, or that kind of internal stress. So that's when we've got the blood sugar roller coaster going on, and we can get that from things like processed foods, from eating too much sugar, all those sort of fast foods, fried foods, nitrates, and not eating properly. So all of that can contribute to our stressful lives. So I just wanted to share that so that you have an awareness of the sorts of things which you might be experiencing in your life. And this might be a really good opportunity now for you just to reflect for a moment and think about your own stress levels. How stressed do you currently feel? Maybe on a scale of 0 to 10, where are your stress levels? If they are above a 7, and they seem to be above a 7 often, then it's really time to start addressing this, because you will be doing more damage than you probably realize, and you will be exacerbating your perimenopause systems. I've seen it firsthand when I work with my clients, and also personally for myself. When we reduce stress in the body, or we find tools to manage our stress, because we're always going to have a certain amount of stress, it makes such a difference to how we feel. So I remember so well those feelings of being so blimmin' stressed out the entire time. I was just constantly chasing my tail. I had a very short fuse. I was incredibly impatient. I was not conscious to my day-to-day life. And I'm really, really delighted to say that sitting here today, life feels very different. I would say my stress levels are incredibly low. And of course, I do get some stress. I'm feeling a little bit stressed at the moment because I'm going on holiday next week, and I've got to get podcast episodes recorded, and I've got to see clients and do all, get everything ready. So there is a little bit of stress, but the tools that I use, and to be honest, I probably use them daily to manage my stress levels, to make sure I am living in the moment, I'm being present, really help me manage that stress and keep me in a place where life feels good, and it keeps my nervous system in a place which is regulated. Now, we often talk about the importance of regulating our nervous system. And this isn't just about always aiming to be in that parasympathetic rest and digest state, because what we actually want is to have a flexible nervous system, which can easily kind of move between that rest and digest state and the fight and flight state. This means that we're not going to get stuck in the sympathetic nervous system. We're not going to get stuck in that stress state. We want our body to know when and how to switch to the parasympathetic, but then also to know when it's important to switch back to the sympathetic. So it's that flexibility which we're looking for. So I'm going to share with you now some practices which I use and which you can use to help you do that. Now, there are so many different practices to help with stress. So I can't obviously talk about every single one of them, because otherwise we'll be here for days. So I've just chosen some which I personally do and which I think are really, really effective. I've got 8 tips here, and most of them I have spoken about before, so there's nothing really brand new here, but I think it's so good to remind ourselves. So the first one I've got is all about balancing blood sugar. Sorting out our blood sugar balance is crucial for reducing that food stress, that sort of internal stress within us. And I have a whole episode on blood sugar balance, which is episode number 43. So I won't talk too much about it here. If you want to learn more, go back to number 43. But the important thing here to remember is that eating a whole food diet as regularly as possible is going to be really, really helpful. So think a Mediterranean style diet with plenty of protein and fiber and healthy fats. So that's plant, fruit and veg and oily fish and nuts and seeds and pulses and lentils and things like that are really going to be helpful. So where possible, make food from scratch so that you know what you're eating. Now, I know this isn't easy to do in our busy lives, and also when we've got potentially quite low energy levels. So make sure that you are just clever about it. You know, you can use those really brilliant pouches you can now buy in the supermarkets of pre-cooked lentils. I often use those and throw a handful of those into a salad. You can do amazing sort of Buddha bowls where you do a little bit of everything into one bowl, just chop up lots of things, a pot of hummus, and just get familiar with food labels. So I always really recommend checking those ingredients lists. You know, the golden rule really is the fewer ingredients in any packaged food, the better. The important thing is just to be able to recognize what the ingredients are. If the ingredients are full of chemical sounding names, it really is best to avoid them, because all those preservatives and flavorings are toxins that will create some sort of stress response in your body and keep those cortisol levels elevated. Caffeine, unfortunately, is also responsible for elevating our cortisol levels. So wherever possible, try and have a coffee with food, because that helps balance the blood sugar levels. Maybe try and replace afternoon coffees maybe with a herbal tea. And the same really goes with sugar and, you know, all of those sort of processed foods, really to try and reduce them. And if you are going to eat sugar, try and eat it at the end of a meal so it doesn't spike your blood sugar as much. And alcohol, sorry to say this, but that's a form of liquid sugar. I still drink alcohol, and when I drink alcohol, I now, rather than just drinking it blindly, I try and be quite intentional about when I'm drinking alcohol. So if I am going to have a drink because I'm doing something with my friends and I feel like a drink would be nice, I kind of am prepared that the next day I'm probably going to feel a little bit shit, because alcohol is like a form of liquid sugar. And I think for a lot of us going through perimenopause, it doesn't agree with us so well. We can't tolerate it as much. So I'm not telling you to cut it out. I know a lot of people do at perimenopause, and if that's you, then gosh, congratulations, because it can really, really help, and it is a stress on the body. So if you are really struggling with perimenopause symptoms, then maybe it's something for you to really consider. Okay, tip number 2. Now, this is all about becoming aware of your thoughts. What is going on in your mind? So we have 60,000 thoughts a day, and 70 to 80% of those thoughts are negative, and up to 90% of our thoughts are on repeat and pretty unconscious. And every time that we have one of those negative thoughts, and that's a lot of negative thoughts, a chemical reaction happens, and a little bit of cortisol is released if it's a negative one. So becoming aware of your thoughts is going to be so helpful. And a great way to do that, well, there are many ways you can do that. We can do that through mindfulness. We can do that through just getting quiet, and we can do that through meditation. I I'm such a believer in all of this stuff because since I have been practicing meditation and mindfulness, I really do feel that it's keeping my nervous system so much more flexible. I've noticed that when I meditate, I'm able to view my stresses and my problems from just with so much more clarity. I'm able to detach from that emotion of my thoughts. And instead of me kind of saying and being in the emotions, so instead of me feeling like I'm so stressed out, it's overwhelming. Instead, what happens, the experience becomes a bit more like, I'm noticing at the moment there's a lot of stress in my life, or I'm noticing at the moment there's a lot of anxiety. So it's a subtle, but really crucially very different perspective. Your stress has become something temporary, which you're experiencing, rather than something that is totally overwhelmingly defining you and who you are. You're not the stress, you're just experiencing it. So what meditation does is it really helps you separate from it. Now, there are so many forms of meditation, and quite possibly you've got your own preferred form already, or you've dabbled in it. What I would say to you is, I encourage you to experiment with lots of different types and find what works for you, because as I always say, we're all so different. You've got to find what works for you. I'm a great believer in the apps such as Calm or Headspace. I definitely got started that way, and they can be a really great way to get you started, but they don't work for everyone. Whatever method you choose, however, start small. Don't set yourself up to do kind of 10, 20, 30 minutes a day. Start with a 2-minute practice or a 5-minute practice. You are so much more likely to follow through if you do that. It's better to be consistent than to have longer practices, because then it's just going to become part of what you do. So don't expect any expectations apart from the fact that you're just going to sit there for 2 minutes or 5 minutes each day, preferably at the same time, because that's going to help build that consistency. Even 5 minutes a day can lead to significant improvements for the mind and for the body. And it's been shown that just 30 days of headspace resulted in a 32% decrease in stress. So this stuff works. And just to remind you and add here, if your mind is busy when you are meditating, that is okay. Many people think that you're not doing it right if you have loads of thoughts going through your mind. It's just not true. It's simply a reflection of where your mind is currently at. Our mind thinks, that is what happens. So you are going to have thoughts. It's about noticing those thoughts and just letting them pass by. That's the important thing. And every time you have an awareness of the thoughts, you are building that muscle. It's like building your bicep muscle and building your awareness muscle. So it's just noticing the thoughts, which is the important thing. So I invite you to observe how you feel before you might practice meditation, and then how you feel after, and see if you notice a difference. However, not all the changes brought about by meditation are immediately obvious. Often the benefits come much later in the day, later in the week, even a few weeks later. But you will definitely notice a better awareness of yourself. And I find that you're able to stop yourself from reacting to a situation with a really hot head and say something you might regret. And instead, you're able to almost take a deep breath, stand back, notice that you're about to say something you might regret. And actually, you can really consider it before you do, and perhaps choose something which isn't quite so fiery to respond to whatever is going on for you. But also meditation, there's been so much research now. It has been proven to increase your energy, to increase your concentration levels, and it really does help lower that anxiety and just increase your general well-being. So I'm a great fan, as you know. I would definitely recommend giving it a go. There is also another sort of strand to meditation. I think it probably falls under the umbrella, which is mindfulness, which is very similar, but actually it's almost easier to do mindfulness activities because you can just do it in everyday activities. You don't really need to be sat down in silence. So some of the things you can do when you're mindful is to really tap in to your five senses and focus on the here and now. And I find a really great way to do this is when you're doing quite boring, mundane tasks. So, for example, cleaning your teeth in the morning and in the evening. I like to stand on one leg because I always kind of like to try and test my balance when I'm doing this. But when I do that, it's almost like a yoga tree pose, but you can really feel the ground beneath your feet. And then, gosh, I do sound a bit of a weirdo sometimes, don't I? But then also just brushing each tooth really mindfully, going through every tooth in your mouth, doing the fronts and backs. That is being really mindful. Another thing I like to do is laundry. I used to hate doing laundry with 3 children. There's just an endless onslaught of washing to be done. But actually now, if I'm in the moment, I'm trying to be mindful and present, I really feel the fabric between my fingers. I enjoy the smell of it. I fold it as beautifully as I can, and it becomes a really satisfying process. So there are lots of different everyday mundane tasks that you can try and be a little bit mindful for. And eating is another great way, and that really also helps with our digestion, because when we slow down and we chew our food properly, it helps the whole process of digestion. It gets all those enzymes working better for us. So that's another really good time to do it. Okay, tip number 3 is practice breath work. Now, I am doing, as I mentioned before, the most incredible course at the moment, which is all about breath work, and I cannot wait to share this with you. I'm going to be doing online workshops and one-to-ones, and it is so powerful. For centuries, humans have known the power of the breath, and I think so many of us have forgotten this power. Deep breathing increases the supply of oxygen to your brain, and it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So it really helps with relaxing us and calming us. I mean, it can also actually raise our energy levels, but it's brilliant for relaxing and calming too. When we're stressed, what we do is we tend to really lock up our breath. But by consciously breathing, we allow ourselves to emotionally come back to a place of balance and peace within our bodies and within our system. Interestingly, the breath is the only automatic and controlled system within our body, which basically means that we can completely control its whole process, but also it works when we're not thinking about it. And this is what just makes the breath so unique. So in each and every moment, we all have the ability to calm our minds down using the power of the breath. So this is something that I really encourage you to do. When I talk about breathwork, there is, of course, the lovely relaxing breathing you might do at the end of a yoga class, or simply exhaling for longer than inhaling. That can shift you out of the sympathetic into the parasympathetic in a really quick time. A great breath to do is the 5-5-7 breath, which I really like. So that's simply breathing in for 5, holding at the top for 5, and breathing out for 7. If you do that 10 times, and brilliant to do it before you eat because it gets you ready for digestion, that shifts you very quickly into that parasympathetic nervous system. But there's also the breath work, which changes your state of consciousness when we alter those levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide in our bloodstream. And this is the part which I'm really learning about, and I really find so fascinating. It's so powerful. And this technique uses the breath not only to tap into our parasympathetic state, but also it heals and shifts stuck emotions stuck in our body. And it really is quite powerful. It can help us tap into our intuition and, so many things, but more on that another time. Okay, my fourth tip is tapping. So very similar in a way to breath work. It really helps decrease the stress hormone cortisol. And research into tapping has shown that tapping decreases the stress hormone cortisol by 43%. It's huge. So this is another great tool. It's a brilliant tool to use in the moment if you are really feeling like you're about to explode. It's a brilliant brain hack which basically overrides your stress response. So it's perfect for reducing those moments of when you just want to scream and you just want to go, ah! I use it quite a lot when I am dealing with my teenagers. The key to tapping is to talk out loud in your head about the emotions that you're feeling. So it literally would be like, oh my gosh, I feel so stressed out. They're so annoying. I found another soggy towel on the floor, whatever it might be. So just start by naming the emotion. Find where it is in your body. You can even give it a colour if you want to as well. And then you just tap through the different points. I'm going to link in the show notes a video which is on my Instagram which shows you all the points and how to do this. But basically, it really helps to shift your negative emotions so that you can feel calmer and happier and reduce those cortisol levels. Okay, tip number 5 is all about movement. We know that movement releases stuck energy, and we also know that it creates all those happy hormones, all those endorphins, which really help us with all those stressy feelings of irritability and anxiety and mood swings, and they are what reduce the cortisol levels in our body and help make us feel so much better. Also, exercise, I find this so fascinating, is a great way to signal to your body that it's safe to turn off the stress response. So if you think all those years ago, those 60,000 years ago, when you finished fighting or running away from that wild animal and you returned to your tribe, to your clan, you probably would have celebrated, which is often what we do at the end of some sort of exercise class. But that sort of end of kind of exercise, if you think you might have been running for your life, and that celebration signals like, right, I can turn the stress response off now, I am safe. And it's the same for us in our modern day lives. Once you have exerted your body, and if you do a little like whoop or a little celebration, that basically signals to your body, right, time for the endorphins, the stress cycle is over, and it can really help reduce those cortisol levels. Just to note here, however, if you are highly, highly stressed and you are in a constant state of anxiety and stress, maybe choose to start with a exercise which is a little bit more calming, something like yoga, maybe more gentle, low intensity, low impact exercise, because you can overstress your body and cause more kind of physical stress if you're not careful. So just start slow, but it is a great, that's why we feel so great after we've exercised. It's a great sort of energy clearer. Okay, tip number 7. So this is about, where possible, trying to avoid plastics, because there is quite a lot of controversy around plastic food containers. There is, in theory, the potential that the hormone disrupting chemicals in the plastics can actually leach into our foods when we eat them. So where possible, it's best to avoid using these plastics because they kind of contribute to this environmental stress. So you can use perhaps silicone foods, containers or glass containers to store foods. I tend to store my foods in in bowls rather than those plastic containers now. And rather than covering in cling film, maybe I just simply put a plate on top of a bowl, or you can use baking paper is useful. And also when you heat food, to do it in glass rather than plastic. So this is just something to be mindful of. And of course, using metal water bottles rather than plastic water bottles for when you're out and about. And obviously it's better for the environment as well. Okay, my final tip is all about doing more of what you love, which I think is probably one of the most important tips, because again, research shows that doing the things you love helps to make you more resilient to stress. The unfortunate thing is, though, often the more stress we have in our lives, the less likely we are to do the things we love. Have a think. When was the last time you did something you really loved just because it made you feel happier and it made you feel less stressed? So this is an invitation to you to just spend a few minutes even to do something today which makes you happy. It could be reading a book, listening to a podcast. Well, listening to this podcast. It might be going for a walk. It might be dancing. Whatever it is, make some time for it. And it will really go a long way to improving your stress levels, lowering those cortisol levels. I know it sounds super simple, but that is the beauty of it. You know, when we keep any lifestyle change simple, we're more likely to do them. So there you have it. I really do hope you have found something in this episode which has resonated, which has been useful, which you can take away with you, and has really made you assess where you are with your stress levels and encourage you to look at how you can reduce stress, because I know for one, it has made my life so much more enjoyable, and as a result, I'm happier and healthier because of it. So here are today's highlights. Number 1, stress disrupts the delicate balance between estrogen and progesterone, exacerbating perimenopause symptoms. Number 2, stress affects your sleep, it increases belly fat, it impacts mental health and disrupts the digestive system. Number 3, factors contributing to stress include emotional, physical, environmental and food-related factors. Number 4, to reduce stress during perimenopause, it's important to focus on what we can control, such as lifestyle changes and food choices. Number 5, balancing blood sugar, eating a whole foods diet and being mindful of chemical ingredient in our food really can help mitigate stress. Number 6, taking care of our overall well-being and managing stress by meditating, tapping, practicing breathwork and getting out in nature can greatly improve our experience during perimenopause. And number 7, why not challenge yourself today to do something you love, because it will reduce your stress levels. Thank you so much for listening. I greatly appreciate it. I know how busy you are. If you have enjoyed this episode, then why not share it with someone who you also feel might benefit from it? Maybe it's someone in your life who is super stressed out and you really think they need to, for their own good, get some practices in their life. Remember, if you are struggling to implement any of these practices, I can really help you integrate these into your day-to-day through a variety of tools such as hypnotherapy, through coaching. So if that's you, you can sign up for a free 15-minute free consultation with me. And that, I think, is everything for today. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Remember, you are absolutely awesome. Take care. Loads of love. Bye.